Tonight, we're going to look at it through the life and poetry of an American who lived it and lived to tell about it. And he sure is telling. It's an American dream story, and you may know some of it, but you don't know all of it, especially since the story's not over. And a new installment just came out heading into this weekend, as Jayz uses an unusually long 4 minutes of straight poetry to tackle the drug war, business, discrimination, and perseverance. The poetry's spoken over a beat in a song with other artists. And I think you'll see why it's poetry as we go through it now. Jay, also known as Hove, marveling how he went from poverty to $1 billion and touting how those others basically came from his same space or crib. Kanye, who worked with him as a producer and collaborator. Rihanna, who Jay signed early on. And LeBron, who's linked to Jay's Rock Nation company. So Jay's reference there to technically is both the caveat, LeBron's done plenty on his own, and a double entendre for technical fouls in basketball. Jay opens there by asking forgiveness for making his first dollars off drugs, cooked on a stove, and notes he left that drug or dope game with his record clean, turning the cocaine into champagne. And that's a nod to how his ability to evade charges, a clean record, gave him the lane to go from street coke to the good life of the champagne. It's also a play on how he makes money off records. His albums are now clean records since he left the street life, while the alchemy of turning illegal coke into legal bubbly sounds like a turn on Jesus turning water to wine. And it is, because soon after Jay completes the parallel.
Jesus turned water to wine for Hove, it just took a stove.
But think about it. There's nothing automatically legitimate about wine or champagne. It was criminally punished during Prohibition, a policy that ultimately fueled gangs and violence and was the only constitutional amendment ever to be reversed because both parties determined that Prohibition was a messy failure. So politicians turned the alcohol back to a legitimate business, a slippery spectrum which Jay notes a few lines later in this poem, saying, "Breezy, what the business is, we pushing Fenty like fentanyl. The ish is all legitimate. He was down 10 for this." And those lines quickly go from prohibition to a war on street drugs associated with minorities, as mentioned earlier in this broadcast, to fentanyl, a huge driver of drug problems and deaths, which politicians do not treat criminally the same way they attack the drugs that Jay or others once sold. I can tell you corporations have made over $10 billion selling addictive painkillers legally. So that's a contrast. Jay also invokes the fellow billionaire Rihanna, citing her Fenty fashion line, noting everything they produce now that they deal, if you will, is legitimate. And that other line I mentioned refers to Emory Jones. He's an associate who served roughly 10 years for a drug sentence and now works at Jay's company. Now look, many listeners may not know his name, but the story is something so many communities know. It illustrates how hundreds of thousands of others are locked up for non-violent drug offenses. The data shows the drug war is discriminatory, that entire categories of drugs can be arbitrarily banned or allowed, often depending on who is really using them.
I got a baby girl in this world, so I ain't got no choice.